Oh boy. I'm detecting buyer's remorse, folks, because I think Ferrari's own chairman has it in spades. And instead of blaming the team for its woes, he's blaming the drivers. The chairman who once boasted of personally securing Lewis's services after the Monaco Grand Prix in 2023 now sounds like a man regretting his own decision. He's now run out of patience seemingly with him and Charles, pointing the finger squarely at those two racers. He's now basically turned the Formula One team and pretty much every other racing team within the marque Ferrari into just various departments of the same entity. That, quite frankly, is a betrayal of Ferrari's own culture, its own tradition. Because in a piece via autoracer.it, Elkan compared Ferrari's dominant world endurance team to the chaos of its Formula One squad, and then turned his fire toward the drivers there themselves. Folks, I've been telling you this for months now. Nothing good can come from when the barrier between the road company and the racing team has been intentionally bulldozed. Enzo deliberately kept a barrier between the racing team and the road-going team to stop corporate interference. What are we seeing right now? Corporate interference! But anyway, here is what John Elkann said for your consideration, and trust me, it is a doozy. Ahem. Ferrari wins when it is cohesive. This is what the result in the WEC taught us, the World Endurance Championship. When everyone is together, great things can be achieved. Brazil was a huge disappointment. In Formula One, we have mechanics who are always first in making pit stops. The engineers work to improve the car. The rest is not up to par. We have drivers who it is important that they concentrate on driving, that they talk less, and that we have important races ahead of us, and it is not impossible to get second place. This is the most important message that comes from Bahrain. That's the final season of the World Endurance Championship where they did secure a lockout. When Ferrari is a team, we win. Yeah, that message is quite blunt, isn't it? The mechanics and the engineers who helped build the SF25 are being removed from the conversation. They're not the ones to blame, apparently. Oh, well, the car is fine. It's a talent issue. Elkan not realizing why the Sao Paulo GP result wound up the way it did, the catalyst for this rant. Both men retired due to external factors beyond their control. Hamilton tapped the back of Colapinto, that cascading into causing irreparable damage to his fore, thus retirement, and as for Leclerc, well, he was a victim of the Antonelli-Piastri incident at Turn 1. If that had not happened and Charles was able to continue and potentially Antonelli was taken out of the result, Leclerc might have been on for a podium perhaps. I really can't imagine that Leclerc is best pleased right now because he has been carrying this team while Lewis has been trying to bed himself in, establish himself in his own right, and has been met with an effective brick wall in the shape of a horse. Because this car, whether you like it or not, is fundamentally flawed, as we saw at the Chinese Grand Prix. It all boiling down to the fact that Ferrari can't run the car too low in an era where you really need to run it as low as possible, because if they did so, they would risk disqualification due to plank wear. That limitation forces them to lift and coast, that Lyco thing, what Leclerc raged about in Singapore. The very car Elkan's blaming the drivers for mishandling physically cannot go any lower without running the risk of even more embarrassment by being ejected from the classification. And also, the whole idea is that Ferrari acts as a whole, that everyone mucks in together and everyone is held to account. In this case, well, no, they aren't all held to account. The mechanics and the engineers are recused of any involvement, and it's down to Lewis and Charles being the main problem. Folks, it's all down to the car not being up to snuff amongst its competitors. Them really dropping the ball, especially when it came to the whole flexi-wing situation. Them just choosing to put a effective hard stop on technical directive 18, thinking that was a hiding to nowhere, whereas other teams like Red Bull and Mercedes were able to find solutions. And also, do Charles and Lewis hold degrees in car design? No, they don't. They race what they're given. And this is yet another reason why I loathed entirely the situation when we found out that Vigna and Elkan were getting themselves more personally involved with the way the Formula One team operated. It was not going to end well, and wouldn't you look at that, it's not ending well right now. The World Endurance team and the Formula One team, it's chalk and cheese. They're totally different. They don't operate within the same wheelhouse. Antonio Fuoco, who was doing an FP1 session for Ferrari, was not right at the top of the sheets like he was at World Endurance. Same would apply if Leclerc or Hamilton were driving a hypercar. They would not be at the top of the order. Ferrari is being run by committee at this point, by people with no imagination or understanding of the creative process. They look at the results at the surface level and they decide to not only throw their drivers under the bus, they've stopped the bus, backed the bus over Hamilton and Leclerc with all the non-racing team members on board, pointed at said roadkill, and called out unity. I'm not afraid to say that some of my takes here on this channel sometimes require the likes of the spanner of speculation, or the foam of doubt, or are maybe tainted with a dash of the cinnamon of cynicism. Not in this case. It's as clear as day by the sheer amount of blowback from this particular quotation. Elkan operating as a traditionalist of Ferrari in the worst possible way. Yes, there are some elements of what he said which are justifiable, because Ferrari is about to win the DHL Fastest Pit Stop Award, and most consistently having the more solid pit stops. You've got to admit, the Scuderia have not really had any bungles in terms of actually getting their cars serviced in the race itself. Well, at least in comparison to McLaren and their own maladies. If that World Endurance team fell off, he would be aiming his ire toward them as well. And now he's telling his drivers to basically shut the fudge up. And when you put that next to the corporately crafted fairness of Zak Brown and the technically minded realism of Lauren Mekies and Toto Wolff, it's a bit of an eye-opener, isn't it? Context really matters here, because Ferrari came into the season with the most glamorous driver lineup on the grid, Hamilton joining Leclerc, in what was meant to be sold as an historic super team. But then you look at the reality here, and Ferrari are, as of this point, winless. Hamilton's establishment has been met with roadblock after roadblock. Yes, you could also maybe argue that he is at the end of his career and not at the peak of his powers, but the wealth of knowledge that he has been able to bring from Mercedes is worth, at the bare minimum, listening to. He has ideas that could be easily implemented by the skilled engineers of Maranello, but the sentiment that you're getting right now is that they don't want to know. They just are not interested in what Lewis has to say. And Charles himself, having been quite outspoken over the years, is now probably meeting resistance of his own capacity too. That the garage is simply divided. Fred Vasseur, at his very best, is trying to calm things down in his own very relaxed manner. And with him gaining a slightly longer-term contract, he is not at the centre of this particular drama right now. But the reality is that the team is currently sitting fourth in the constructors. They think they can get to P2, but they are now setting just almost 40 points shy of Mercedes with only 3 rounds to go, and we're heading to Vegas, and Mercedes may really like that. But also at the same time, there is a lot of prize money being lost and a lot of prestige being compromised. And you got to remember the last 2 times we were in this situation where Ferrari really dropped the ball in the team standings. Vettel in 2020, Alonso in 2014. There was a major upheaval in the driver order. Either the drivers wanting to leave or the drivers being pushed out. In that light, Elkan's words look purely political, talking to 3 audiences at once, which are the shareholders, the Maranello base, and the Tifosi. He's choosing to draw the circle of blame around Hamilton and Leclerc, the most expensive assets within the team. And as you most likely have witnessed, both Lewis and Charles have come together to clap back with their own messages of commitment, tit for tat. But you're probably asking why. Why single out the drivers and urge them to talk less and drive more? Well, because in John Elkann's mind, him being the head honcho of Ferrari, those 2 drivers are basically expendable. They're pawns. You can always get another driver who's currently operating well if they're not operating Lewis and Charles. But in a way, Elkan kind of has no choice but to blame the drivers, because there are only 2 of them. If you go and blame the engineers and mechanics, they can leave. And we've seen quite a lot recently. Many high-profile engineers and mechanics leave the team to go somewhere else, fed up with the lot at the Scuderia. So really, they can't afford to lose any more. It also risks admitting that his own governance and resource allocation are failing since he's decided to take charge of the operation, instead of letting Vasseur do it himself. I think you probably can imagine that morale over at Ferrari is quite low right now, so you can reframe the failure of the drivers in securing at least a Grand Prix victory this year outside of a sprint as disobeying the ethos of the team itself, that they are the problem. And it doesn't help Hamilton's case that he recently described himself as living in a living nightmare within this team, it offering a nice tidy hook for Elkan to jump upon. It turned legitimate critique into a soundbite that could be framed as negativity, hurting cohesion that you're getting at the World Endurance team. Lewis lamenting his lot currently, and Charles criticising decisions whilst he's racing in the car, is ammunition to fuel Elkan's logic here. Yeah, but really, is that the wisest thing to do in this economy where social media presence really, really matters? and both those drivers are the most influential drivers in the sport, or maybe all of sport, telling F1's biggest communicators to stop talking. Yeah, that's a hiding to nowhere, my friend. Especially after you built all of your marketing in the preseason as having the best operators and the most influential people who are really good at talking. All of this just makes me think that Ferrari and Elkan are very much out of touch with how modern day Formula One operates, and just goes to show that involving upper management with any creative endeavour that is not within their own wheelhouse specifically, if they've not done the dirty work themselves back in the day, you just need to stick away from that. And it also signals that Ferrari really does like star power, so long as they sing from the same hymn sheet. If they start to oppose the edict over at that team, oh, they don't like it one bit. This is nothing new. We've seen Ferrari do this time and time again. You could easily say that scapegoating is one of Ferrari's oldest traditions. They've done this so many times with drivers who have not been able to deliver expectations or have been very outspoken. But the reason why I think it's stinging the most is because of who the drivers are. A 7-time world champion and Il Predestinato. Both command enormous respect with their audiences and have immense narrative power. They've been honest about their struggles and frustrations this year, and from Elkan's point of view, honesty is clearly not the best policy. In short, fake it until you make it. And it all goes to show that the racing operations of Ferrari are no longer semi-autonomous creatures. They are very much now just corporate departments within a bigger unit. Their drivers no longer racing drivers, but they are ambassadors of the brand. And right now, Lewis and Charles are not speaking the way the brand wants them to speak. But I can tell you that neither Lewis or Charles are taking this lying down. Hamilton's "I back my team, I back myself, I will not give up" is blunt. He rejects the idea that he's mentally elsewhere and crucially frames himself as part of my team, not above it or against it. Over on Leclerc's socials, he goes as far as using the word unity himself and saying, "We'll give it all." Neither accept the blame, no, of course not. But they're also not using their own heft to swing back at management. They are not stooping to that level. What they're doing, on the surface at least, is saying that we are united. Simple as. Yes, it's not as simple as that. What I think Elkan was expecting was to maybe Lewis and Charles go at each other's throats saying, "I'm believing the team, it's my teammate that isn't," and initially I thought the same thing. But when I stepped back to take a look at it, I just realised the genius and cohesion between those two entities, that they realised, wait a minute, we're being thrown under the bus here. That's not right. Surely you must agree, right? Why don't we say something to show that we are united, that there is nothing bad between us, and that will only undermine what Elkan said. Two drivers projecting unity in of themselves with their own skills with social media, which clearly Ferrari lacks. Oh, that was a nice clap back, gentlemen. It also may galvanise the devoted mechanics and engineers who are backing Charles and Lewis to a hilt, then perhaps realising that these drivers do have their backs and they are not prepared to just blame other people, that it might be really complicated at the moment, and it might see division even more to the point where something behind the scenes has to be done. And the Tifosi, they are very emotionally invested with Lewis and Charles, and them broadcasting unity is going to go down very, very well, especially with this shot across the bows from management. But at the same time, I'm pretty sure they want someone to blame here. They want somebody's head, and John does not want to be the sacrificial lamb. So instead, blame the drivers from his gilded seat. But that plan risks backfiring horribly, because the fan and media reaction so far has included a lot of "this is on management" talk, that kind of chestnut. But why does this talk less instruction feel especially off these days? Well, I mean, it's simple, given the environment we live in. Drivers within Formula One are expected to talk a lot. That is the whole thing. That is why Thursday's media day exists. We have social media, we have constant coverage, we have interviews, we have discussions amongst various forums where drivers are expected to chat about what's going on with their lot. And both Lewis and Charles have plenty of things to say. They are very outspoken, so for them to suddenly not speak out, that would signal alarm bells in of itself. And also, to tell them to can it actually sort of questions the leadership credentials that the team claim to be buying into. That, well, they haven't got anything to say. Well, What's the point of them even being there? Why are they being paid this amount of money? It just makes Ferrari out to be fools in actually investing in them, and especially Leclerc's case, and them investing in him for over a decade at this point. And it also contradicts the narrative of Hamilton being there. He was meant to usher in a brand new order, the brand new super team with Lewis in charge, to challenge complacency, to shake things up a little bit. But clearly this was all a lie, and it's also deeply ironic. Elkan publicly framed himself as the guy responsible for the Hamilton move, the man who finally delivered the dream union of Ferrari and a 7-time world champion, with The Independent, for example, captioning him as a key player in the deal. To stand up less than a year later, after Lewis was wheeled out around Maranello in front of Enzo's house, and singling both him and Charles out, raises questions about how Elkan understands what kind of project he thinks he's running. So for the third and final time this video, Enzo Ferrari was right! Yeah, okay, for Leclerc, these words probably hurt even more than it probably hurts Lewis. After years of loyalty and sacrificing the peak years of his career, this is how Ferrari's main man thanks him in public? Time is ticking, and that might mean that his faith might be limited at this point. Also, despite him carrying the team through Hamilton's bedding-in period, giving the team something to add to their trophy cabinet at least, he finds himself lumped in with Hamilton as part of the rest. It's ungrateful behaviour from Elkan, wouldn't you say? And for Hamilton, you just gotta feel for the guy. I'm not asking you to show pity toward him, he wouldn't want that. But the fact remains is that this was a boyhood dream which has turned into a nightmare. No wonder Lewis had said that. This is a living nightmare. This was supposed to be the most elegant swan song to at least contributed something toward Ferrari. He wants to contribute something to Ferrari. He's got so many ideas to share. Yet simply, he's meeting closed door after closed door. There are so many reported divisions within the team that simply are ignoring him and resent the fact that Hamilton wants to rattle a few cages because that's not the Ferrari way. It just reminds me of John Barnard designing cars his way within the UK, and then Piero Ferrari saying, "Oh wow, that guy was so disruptive, I'm glad he's not there anymore." Even though John Barnard gave the team at least a little bit of hope in terms of some glory in the 1990s, quite a few of his cars were pretty good, ultimately peaking with Schumacher's 1997 car. And if 2026 turns out to be a dud as well, Lewis is very much looking at the reality of his career ending with a resounding whimper, and his legacy being tarnished for the fact that Ferrari just simply were blocking their ears. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen. Things could easily change next year, but it's something that could happen. I feel for anyone who is a Lewis Hamilton fan, this is not the way to go out, not like this. So naturally, Lewis is going to push back, quite rightly so. So naturally, you would be thinking, well, if John Elkann's lashing out like this, then his job's on the line. But we need to separate the vibes from the data. Operationally, Ferrari is still a monster. Last year broke all records with rising revenue. This year, the brand remains absurdly lucrative. Where things have wobbled, though, are expectations for the future. Now, you know all about the electric car hype train at the moment. Well, Ferrari had invested at least a little bit into it, but they cut back their expectations, as well as their overall expectations going through the rest of the 2020s, all the way through to 2030. Investors did not like that things were being clipped in terms of the grand dreams and projections that were previously broadcast. You know the whole thing's about buying the rumour, which was all the talk, and then selling the news. That's exactly what happened here. Ferrari lost a lot of valuation in one day because of Elkan limiting their expectations. It might seem scary to the uninitiated, but it's not the end of the world here. Ferrari is not about to go bankrupt. It's nowhere near as bad as it is with Aston Martin's road-going division. They have no longer any connection to that Formula One team, bar Papa Stroll. They sold that stake to help pay off some of their debts. Well, a lot of their debts, hundreds of millions in debts. Ferrari does not have that problem. And like I said, John Elkann is not some kind of rando who has no connection to Ferrari's parts whatsoever. He is part of the Agnelli family who hailed from the days of Fiat and the 1960s, who had worked with Enzo directly. Partly the reason why there was that divide between the road company and the racing team. Now that it is gone, it's the Agnelli family getting their revenge or retribution, or restoring the order as it once was. So you could easily argue that this outburst is coming from a guy who seems quite confident in his own position as the Ferrari chairman, that, yeah, he's had some wobbles financially in recent times, but Ferrari is still going strong, at least for now. So he can thump his chest, and therefore put all of the onus on the drivers because he's punching down on them. They're not delivering, he is delivering, and therefore he can act all superior. That's exactly what he did. But he's still a man who doesn't understand what the Formula One team is all about, and modern day Formula One. That Lewis and Charles are very powerful entities who have been willing to play ball with the Ferrari way of doing things. This, in a way, them sort of going, well, yeah, we are united. What's the problem, mate? You know, with hundreds of thousands of likes and having millions and millions of fans across the world, they're going to listen and they're not going to like what Ferrari's chairman said. I mean, Matty Boy himself is basically saying, look what they've done to my soul! Elkan wants to bring all of the racing teams under one edict or else face the consequences, but that goes against the tradition that Ferrari clings on to for dear life. Tradition that the Tifosi embrace as well. And the Tifosi's likely reaction is going to be crucial. Ferrari fans, yeah, they're famously emotional and passionate, but they are not. I repeat, they are not stupid, mindless sheep. They know very plainly if their car is capable of going up against their rivals. They saw it as plain as day last year, where they rebounded from their mid-season slump and came to within 14 points of winning team glory. So I'm quite certain that the Tifosi recognise that their car this year is an absolute dog. Many will bristle the chairman saying this about their team and their drivers, even if he is also blowing smoke up the arse of the World Endurance team. And they'll also not like the fact that he's choosing to blame the drivers instead of just owning up to the fact that the team he's decided to take responsibility for is not doing enough, that the resources that he's funneled toward that organisation have not been able to make a car which is worthy of a 7-time world champion, and a driver who's pinned all of his hopes in representing Ferrari forever. So in short, John Elkann has made his bed, but he simply does not want to lie in it. Well, matey, you have to lie in it. You wanted this, you're getting it. So if Hamilton and Leclerc continue to gain support, it's really going to instill that there is a narrative which is akin to rulers versus racers, something which has dogged Ferrari's legacy for quite some time, but is now bigger than ever. I don't know when this will all blow up or implode, but I feel like the ingredients are there, that it will come in the not too distant future if things continue the way they are. And it just shows that Elkan does not want to collaborate with the Formula One team. He just wants to exert yet more control and take all the credit if times are good over at that team. Like he wants to take credit for the fact that the endurance team completely dominated World Endurance, having the top 3 places and winning the Constructors. This quote of his matters. In one paragraph, he exposed the tension at the heart of Ferrari's F1 team. That a glossy celebrity super team sold as a cultural reset is now constrained by an old-fashioned top-down expectation of obedience and silence at the moment their credibility depends on honesty. Because what can Lewis and Charles say? Everything is fine, there's nothing to worry about? You really think that's going to sit well with the Tifosi? That they are 4th place in the Constructors at the moment, they've not won a single race, Charles is the only one getting podiums at this point, and the car simply has not kicked on. Those are the truths. So, at this point, you want the drivers to act delusional? You're having a laugh, mate. And it also shows that, yes, Ferrari prides itself on being the longest-standing Formula One team and exerting tradition and harking back to the days of the 1950s. But it also shows it cannot mesh and adapt to the way Formula One works right now, where you do need to be held accountable, where transparency is the watchword. There are so many avenues to analyse and look at certain things. You cannot hide anymore. And Ferrari simply is trying to just hide everything under the same message. If Ferrari does turn this around, this whole saga can then be described as something akin to tough love on the path to redemption. But if it doesn't, and it's looking likely that it might not, it'll be remembered as the moment when maybe both their drivers looked inward and maybe decided it wasn't worth staying at Ferrari. Lewis becoming jaded with Formula One and wishing to tap out, and Charles Leclerc doing the same thing when his 2027 exit clause is maybe activated and they'll have to look to somebody else. That maybe the team he stuck his coat of arms to is not the same anymore. But a thing that is a lot simpler is this video over here, which I know you will enjoy. I'll see you over there.